everyone, it's Molly Burke here again, and today I'm doing, I guess, kind of a different video for what I usually do, but today I'm hoping will be kind of an educational piece for some of my subscribers and hopefully a helpful piece for some other subscribers. And if you're really confused, I guess you won't be confused because you'll see what the title is, but basically today's video is going to be me telling you about my life experience living with the disease I have, which is retinitis pigmentosa. So I am not a doctor, I have not studied any of this, I'm not trained. I am telling you my personal experience. And something that I've noticed with RP, which is the short form for retinitis pigmentosa, so that's probably how I'm always going to be referring to it as, is that every single person's experience is different. And it's the same way really with any medical condition. Everybody's experience is going to be completely and totally different. So my experience might be very unique to your experience if you have RP, or if your friend or family member has RP. And then for those of you who know nothing about retinitis pigmentosa, I just hope this is an educational piece and will open your eyes to the world that some of us live in. So I'm gonna do the whole journey, and I'm 21, so this is gonna be 21 years worth of story. So I'm sorry if this video is super long and rambly and not really like following structure. I'm gonna try to kind of follow the timeline, but I'm sorry if I get sidetracked or I think of a point that I want to mention. I'll try my best to stick on track. Here we go. So I was born on February 8th, 1994, and I was a healthy little baby. Everything was fine for the first 6 months. And then when I was 6 months old, my grandfather, who we called Grandy, was holding me in his arms, and he noticed that my body would never stop shaking. And for those few periods when my body wasn't shaking, my eyes were shaking. And my aunt, my dad's sister, was a nurse at the time, and she knew that this was very serious. This was something not good. Typically things like that are signs of neurological problems, so problems in the brain. It's a very common symptom of a brain tumor. It's a very common symptom of somebody who might be epileptic or basically just have any kind of a severe neurological issue. So my aunt was very concerned, and she immediately got in touch with one of her doctor friends who was one of the head neurologists at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And I was immediately accepted in to Sick Kids to go see a brain specialist. And they did a bunch of tests. Again, they were very concerned that I might have had a tumor. And luckily, of course, the MRIs and the tests that they did showed that I did not have a tumor, but that I did have a basically very rare brain condition that I believe about 1 in 1 million babies are born with. I'm sorry, I don't know the name. It's really not been a big feature in my life. It's not really impacted me very much because what this brain condition does is it causes you to shake, but it's something that when you have it, when you're born with it, you grow out of at a very young age. So basically the doctors told my parents it's not a big deal. There's kind of like something going on in her brain, but she will grow out of it and she'll be fine. It's not going to affect her at all. And so my parents were like, great, this is probably the best possible news that we could get given how severe the results could have been. So they took me home, treated me like any other little baby, and they started noticing that yes, my body had stopped shaking, but my eyes were still shaking, and those weren't stopping. And so they took me back to Sick Kids, and the neurologist then informed them that this didn't seem to be a neurological problem anymore because I had in fact grown out of that condition, and he was sending me down to ophthalmology, which is the eye specialists. And so I went down to the ophthalmology clinic, and I was diagnosed with nystagmus, which is the shaking eyes. Basically, it's like a lack of muscle control, and so the eyes just continue to shake. And I was also diagnosed with strabismus, which is a lazy eye. So when one eye goes off center or doesn't look in line with the other eye. And I did in fact have both of those things. Nystagmus, they basically told my parents wouldn't really be a big deal or affect me in a big way, but that the strabismus they would be able to hopefully work on fixing. And I had it in my right eye, my left eye was fine. And so what they did was they put a patch on my left eye because that was my strong eye, it was straight, and they wanted to try and strengthen the muscles in my right eye by patching this one and forcing this right eye to do all the work for me. And so when they patched that eye, my parents started noticing that my depth was completely off. I would go to reach for a cookie on the table and completely go off track. Like I would go way too right or way too left. I would just totally miss the mark. Or I would be at the playground and I would be tripping on stairs that I was totally fine with before they patched my eye. And so they basically brought me back to the doctors again at Sick Kids, and they were like, okay, well, you know, the patch isn't straightening her eye anyways, so we'll stop that treatment and let's just do the surgery. So when I was, I believe, 4 years old is when I had my first eye surgery, and they cut the muscles, they pulled them tight, and they tied them, basically, is like, obviously not the scientific way of explaining it, but that's kind of the gist of what they do in that surgery. And for me, the surgery was a success because obviously you can see that both of my eyes are completely straight now. So that was great news, but I was still obviously having those issues, like the depth perception, and they didn't really know why. So they started doing more and more eye tests. My childhood was filled with hospital visits and eye tests and different stuff, but they basically discovered that I was farsighted and nearsighted, lucky me. And so they gave me glasses and they said, you know, she has the nystagmus, she has the farsighted nearsightedness, her strabismus is fixed, she should be relatively okay, she'll just have to wear glasses for the rest of her life. And so my parents at this point sent me back off to school, and I was now in senior kindergarten. So I completed junior kindergarten, was now in senior kindergarten, and my teacher was very concerned because I was the only student in my class who could not read yet, and I was the only student who could not focus. I wouldn't pay attention to fine details. If they were ever doing like fine detail work in class, I would not be focusing or paying attention. And although the other staff at the school thought I probably had like ADHD or some form of learning disability, my senior kindergarten teacher was great, and she told my parents, I don't think this child has any of those issues. I think she's not seeing properly. And my parents were pretty frustrated at this point because they're like, you know, we've been going to the doctors since she was 6 months old and she's almost 5. Like, what is the problem? We just got a new prescription put in. There's no way. And so they brought me back to Sick Kids and told the doctors what the teacher had said. And I guess before they did that, I should backtrack a little bit more. I had also been starting to say things at nighttime. If I was walking outside in the garden at nighttime with my family, I'd be clinging on to them and I'd be really anxious and scared, and I would keep telling them I can't see anything, I can't see anything. And my parents and their friends and kind of the people in my life, they would keep kind of trying to explain to me that we know you can't see as well as you can during the day. It's different, like the world doesn't look the same, but you can kind of see outlines and shadows of things. And I would just be really scared. And they just thought I was afraid of the dark. But they told the doctor when they took me back, you know, this is what her senior kindergarten teacher told us. And these are the things we're noticing, that she seems really anxious at nighttime and she doesn't seem to be wanting to be independent, or she's saying things like she can't see, and she's still having depth field issues, she's reaching for stuff and missing and stuff like that. So that started a whole host of other tests, and finally when I was 4 years old, almost 5, they arrived at the result of retinitis pigmentosa, which is the deterioration of the retina in your eye. And from that point, I should probably explain that not only is retinitis pigmentosa a rare disease, which is why it took them a while to diagnose it, but on top of that, I did have all those other things. I do have nystagmus, I did have the brain condition, I did have strabismus, and these things don't often come along with RP. I'm just kind of the lucky person who has RP plus a bunch of other stuff is much more minor. So it was kind of very distracting from what the main cause of my issues actually was. And on top of that, what was frustrating for my family with the diagnosis of RP is that that's kind of like the general diagnosis of something like cancer. It's just a heading. It's a term used with a whole bunch of stuff underneath it. Or the word flower. You can say flower, but there's hundreds of kinds of flowers. And similarly, there's hundreds of types of basically genes that can be defective or have some kind of error in them that causes the RP. And depending on what gene you have will change the way your vision reacts. So some people with retinitis pigmentosa are born completely blind, and some people can drive a car until they're 80. It really depends. Typically with RP, it's a much later in life diagnosis. I was very young to be diagnosed with RP. Even though I said it took them a long time to arrive to that diagnosis, I meant that it took them a long time to arrive to that diagnosis given I had been going since the time I was 6 months, and I did have much earlier signs because I had early onset RP. But most people with RP are older. Middle-aged is kind of the most common, middle-aged and onwards, but it is not as common to have it when you are just 4 years old or even the age that I am now, 21, especially at the state that I'm at with my RP. And so at that time, I was diagnosed in 1998, and the hope for a cure was very low, and the research happening in terms of figuring out my genetic defect was not very much. So they would do blood tests, but nothing much was happening. At that point in my life, I switched to only going to sick kids every 6 months for checkups so they could see the progression of my vision, take more blood tests, send it out to different labs all over the world. My blood has traveled more of the world than most people probably have. I think it's been to like Switzerland and Germany and Colombia and all of these different states and countries, and it's pretty crazy, but they continued to not find anything. And my vision throughout my childhood was on and off. So I've always been completely night blind. I have never seen anything in the dark. So I am great when it comes to blackouts. I have some good stories about that. If you want to hear them, comment down below and let me know if you'd be interested in hearing some of those funny blackout stories. But I've never seen at night, and I've never had depth perception. So when it came to things like stairs, I would just fall down them because I wouldn't see that there was a difference in the elevation, I guess. It would look flat to me, but there would really be stairs. So I was always tripping and falling and hurting myself, but my parents were great at letting me live a completely and totally normal childhood. If I was gonna fall and scrape my knee, I was gonna fall and scrape my knee. My parents did not bubble me or shield me from life, which I cannot even express to you how much I appreciate. My parents let me do everything. In fact, they probably let me do more than most kids did. They put me in every sport and every activity you could possibly imagine. And they really wanted me to do everything possible before I went blind, because they knew that it was a possibility that one day I could maybe go blind. And the doctors ultimately couldn't tell them if that would ever happen or when it would ever happen. The doctors told my parents that it would most likely, if I did go completely blind, it would most likely happen in my 40s and 50s. So that's what they were expecting. But they wanted to make sure I had a full childhood, just in case it happened earlier, which now we know it did. So we're lucky that they had that outlook. And I immediately started learning things like pre-braille skills, so training my fingers to be extra sensitive by working with things like fabric books to detect, using my hands, match the two fabrics based on touch and that kind of thing. And then I started learning braille and so on and so forth, but I could still, I could read slightly larger print. So once they enlarged print, I started to learn to read and write, and I used black markers instead of pencils. I used a whiteboard in class instead of a chalkboard and things like that. And so there was things like that, but it wasn't really impacting my life in a huge way because I was still doing everything else that my classmates were doing. So I basically just continued in my childhood going back to sick kids, and they would do the tests. Sometimes I had lost a little bit of vision, and a lot of the time it had been stable, which is a really good sign. My vision was not deteriorating, which was great. They would take pictures of my retinas using, of course, like different machines. They wouldn't just take a picture of my eyes. They would go in there with machines. They would do all sorts of yucky, painful, uncomfortable things. And that was that. In grade 3, I first started noticing color changes. So all of my colors went completely wacky. I was seeing colors as different things. Like blue didn't look blue, blue looked yellow. Like colors were just completely off, and I started seeing flashing crazy lights all the time, which was really concerning. And that was the first time I ever had a teacher think that I was faking it, and it's not a nice feeling when somebody tells you that you're faking something that is completely terrifying in your life. At that time I was also getting severe migraines and headaches from eye strain and eye pressure. So that was a time in my life that was really scary for my family and myself. And the doctors basically said that it was normal, unfortunately, and the colors could switch back to normal or maybe not, so we just had to wait and see. And luckily they eventually that same year did, but the flashing colors and crazy whizzing lights never did. I see those to this day constantly 24/7. They never go away. And I've seen them ever since I was 8 years old. And the doctor at the time told my family just to comfort me and to tell me that it was okay and to sit back and enjoy the fireworks show. So that's what I do. Every time I'm bored, I'm like, hey, fireworks in my head. Later in life, I think I was about 16 when I was finally starting to be curious and asking the doctors questions about my disease. And I asked her, like, why do I see these crazy flashing lights in color? And specifically, mine are green, blue, and purple. So, and they're always the same. They look like those neon signs that are lit up at nighttime at convenience stores or whatever. And they're specifically only those 3 colors. So those are the 3 colors that I still see, and I know that they're those colors because I've been seeing them ever since I was in grade 3. Even though I don't have any concept at this point in my life of colors, I still know that that's the colors that they are based on the fact that I've been seeing them ever since I was 8, and that's the colors that they were back then. So I mentioned the whizzing, crazy flashing lights and colors, and that I can only remember that these 3 colors I'm seeing are blue, purple, and green because I used to see them in the past. And for those of you who are probably thinking, well, of course you could see then, so of course now you'd remember colors, but that's not how it works. My visual memory has not maintained itself, and it doesn't for anyone who loses their sight. After a while, you forget what things look like. Visual memory, I believe the span of visual memory is like up to 7 years. But yeah, I can't remember colors. I can't draw images up in my brain of what colors look like. So that's kind of what I meant by that, is that I don't have visual memory of what things look like. I don't know what I look like. I don't know what the color red looks like. I can't pull images up in my head of what I looked like as a child or my family looked like. I don't remember any of that stuff. So that's kind of an explanation of that. So my doctor said that when my brain started to lose a bit more vision, it kind of freaked out and panicked, and it tried to rewire itself to see again. And so in my case, it rewired itself, and now it sees flashing, crazy, whizzing, colored lights. And so that's my daily life, and it has been ever since then. But at that point, I would just kind of look past it. I got very used to seeing them all the time, so it didn't really affect me. It just became a part of Molly's weird, crazy vision. And it was also in grade 3, nope, that's a lie, it was in grade 4. It was in grade 2 that I first started learning how to use a white cane, but it was in grade 4 that I started using that white cane majority of the time. Just because, again, for depth perception, I was missing stairs and stuff, so I was getting injured and whatnot, and I can go into detail with any of these things, like if you want to hear about my experience learning O&M or my experience learning Braille, if you want to hear about my experience with some blind related or visually impaired related accidents or funny stories, just comment down below and let me know, because I will totally do that. But I started using that full time at nighttime and just for places where I didn't really know the stairs and stuff like that. And that was that. That was grade 4, and up until grade 7. The end of grade 7, my vision was completely stable. I had no changes. It was great. I continued to read large print and go about my life. I still did downhill skiing and horseback riding and all these different things, and life wasn't so bad. And then the summer between grade 7 and 8, I went to train with my first guide dog, Gypsy. I'll insert an image here. And while training with Gypsy, I remember calling my mom and saying, like, things don't look the same as they used to. And it wasn't that colors had flipped like they had when I was in grade 3. It was that colors were fading. Like black all of a sudden started looking gray, yellow started looking white, all dark colors started looking the same. So black, brown, navy blue, dark purple, forest green all looked black. I couldn't pick out one color from another. And it's same with pastel colors, they all looked white. And I was pretty scared at that point, but I figured, you know, when I go home in the fall, I'll have my sick kids appointment at this point in my life, because my vision had been so stable, I was now only going once a year. And it was always in the fall, so I was like, you know, it'll be fine. I just kind of brushed it off. And fast forward to that October when I went for my appointment, I had my brand new guide dog with me and things were great. And that's when I basically found out that I had lost a very large chunk of vision, and they basically, just couldn't tell me what was next. They couldn't tell me what that meant. It might stabilize, but it probably wouldn't. There wasn't an answer. Long story short, over the next 6 to 8 months of my grade 8 year when I was 13 and 14, I slowly lost my vision. Everything faded away, hazed over, and closed in until it was basically nothing anymore. I am now considered medically completely blind. And I say medically completely blind because when I say completely blind, everybody has this idea that people who are completely blind see absolutely nothing. They live in complete darkness and there's nothing in their life that they can see, which is wrong. So even though I'm considered completely blind to the medical profession, I do see some things. So I still have light perception, which means I can tell when it's sunny out, I can tell where lights are and if they're on in a room. And that does allow me to see some shapes and shadows of things. So that's what I see on my daily basis. It really depends. If I'm stressed or tired, I see less. I have less perception. If it's a cloudy day, I have less perception. Depending on the light, I have more or less perception. It just all depends. Given that I do have light perception, when I'm really stressed out or really tired, people always know because I typically always look at people, and people say I look them in the eye, which creeps me out just as much as it creeps them out. But basically I can do that by basing where the sound of their voice is coming from, and because I have echolocation, I can hear sound waves bouncing off of objects. It's a skill that I've developed through my O&M instructor from a very young age. And not all blind people can do it, but I'm lucky that I do have very sensitive ears and can do that. So based on the sound waves bouncing off of their body and the voice, I can kind of tell where it's coming from, so that's kind of how I do that. But my eyes, with their light perception, instead of looking at people when I'm talking to them, I just stare directly at whatever light is closest to me. So say we're in a dark restaurant and it's late at night and I'm tired, my eyes will not leave the candle in the center of the table like that. Obviously I can't see that it's a candle, all I can see is a little flickering flame, and I just stare at that flame like intensely, and I can't pull my eyes away from it. Or if there's like a chandelier and I'm at somebody's house in a nice dining room, my eyes will be floating to the ceiling staring at the chandelier, and I sit there talking like this. And it's frustrating for me because I know that's socially inappropriate and just looks a little bit odd, but physically, like, my eyes just glue to the light because my brain is finally getting some stimulation and some feedback, and it's like excited, so my brain just controls my eyes in that moment, and I can't draw them away from it. So it's as frustrating for me as it is when people are sitting across from me and I'm looking at the ceiling or staring at the center of the table. And given my light perception, I can also see things that light bounces off of, so I can like shine a mirror and I can like see the light bouncing off of it, or I can like metallic shoes like I showed in my last video, like I can see the metallics or sequins like in the pillow I have back here. I can see those sequins glittering, and so I love metallic stuff. I love sparkly and glittery stuff because it gives my eyes feedback and it makes my brain super happy. And so I do have some blindisms, which are basically like quirky things that blind people do, and I'm very private about mine. I'll only ever do it if I'm really comfortable around somebody and I know that they'll fully accept me doing it. I do it in front of my boyfriend, my family, my best friends. So I'll do things like I'll take a water bottle and I'll hold it up to a light and I'll just like move the water bottle back and forth because the water makes different like waves and the light shines through it differently. Or I'll take any shiny item and I'll like hold it up close to my eye and I'll move it around to see the light. And I know it's strange to a fully sighted person, but it just stimulates my brain, and it's a really awesome feeling, as creepy and weird as that sounds. So that's really that. That was the hardest time in my life. I had a lot of people not believing that it was happening. My doctors always believed me because they could physically see the deterioration on my retina. When you have retinitis pigmentosa, a healthy retina looks almost like a fresh piece of salmon, as gross of a comparison as that is. This is what my doctors explained to me anyway. It's meaty, it's juicy, it's pink, it has healthy blood vessels, and it looks really lovely. My retina, on the other hand, at this point, looks like sandpaper. It's thin, it looks completely dried out. The blood vessels are very thin and minimal, and it just looks spotty. it looks kind of black and gray. It does not look very healthy at all. And so there's no way I can fake that. And so my parents, my family was always very supportive, but I had a lot of teachers, it was mainly teachers at my school, that kept telling my family that they thought I was faking it wasn't really happening. And it was hard because my parents didn't have an official full diagnosis of what kind of RP I had to back up why I'd be losing my vision so fast, because typically with RP, the decline is nowhere near as fast as mine was. It's years and years, not months like mine. And when I was 16, we finally got the email from the gene counselor that I've been working with, who gave me the diagnosis of TULIP1, which, lucky me, is one of the rarest forms of a rare disease. And basically, TULIP1 patients often experience a very fast decline, and they experience it in times of stress or hormonal changes, which makes sense for me because I was going through puberty at that age, so my hormones were changing, which is what caused my vision to go. And they experience a fast decline, which again makes sense because that's what I experienced, a much faster decline. This is a genetic disease, but the geneticist that I worked with explained that TULIP1 is a form that probably will not pass down. So if I had children, she said she's almost positive they would not have it. My brother doesn't have it. Nobody in my family's history has had it, and they basically say that nobody in my family's future should ever have it. There are forms of RP that are more common to be passed down. I'm a part of a Retinitis Pigmentosa support group on Facebook, and there's quite a few people in that group who do have family history of it, and there's a lot more who don't have any family history of it. So it just really depends. Symptoms of retinitis pigmentosa are usually, the main symptoms are night blindness and tunnel vision are the two first things that people will notice. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, those were my symptoms. But some of the more uncommon things that people with RP often experience is really bad headaches or really bad eye pains. I experienced that. People with retinitis pigmentosa, whether they're post-vision loss, during vision loss, or pre-vision loss, are often a lot more fatigued than others. They need often a lot more sleep than other people. I am certainly that way. I need a lot more sleep at night than my friends do. I need a lot more hours of sleep than people my age do. And that's just because, you know, I have a disease living in my body, and it takes a toll. I've also been told by some of my medical team that I work with that when you have a disease in one organ, it basically throws off your whole body, because your whole body is one unit. You're all connected. And I have a disease in one of my organs, the eyes. And so it kind of changes how your nervous system works in your body, which means you can, for some people, tend to be more prone to other diseases or other illnesses. And I've personally had other health issues in my life. I have low protein S in my liver, which means I'm more prone to things like blood clots. I have a lot of food sensitivities and food issues, and some other stuff as well that I won't get into because this video has already been long enough. But basically, you know, this is a disease that I'll live with for the rest of my life. There is currently no cure for it or treatment. The Foundation Fighting Blindness, who I will link the website down below, Foundation Fighting Blindness Canada, who I've been working with since I was 5, are raising money to give to scientists to help find cures and treatments. And they're definitely making leaps and bounds compared to what was happening when I was diagnosed. There was no hope back then, and there's a lot of hope now. And if you want a video on my opinion of a cure, then please comment down below again. I will totally do a video on my view of, do I want a cure, do I not, do I feel I need a cure, and that kind of thing. I'm definitely open to talking about that if you're interested. Oh gosh, this is just so rambly, I'm sorry. But yeah, that's my story. I've experienced depression, I've experienced anxiety, I've experienced a lot of things that are triggered, if not supported, by my retinitis pigmentosa, and they're just things that you learn to live with when you have a disease and when you've grown up with it. And I'm at a point in my life with full acceptance. This is who I am. I love myself. I wouldn't change a thing. I just wish that every RP patient or everybody living with illness or disability could get to that point in their life as well. Because I've truly realized you can't change it. And if you can't change something, you have to learn to accept it. There's no point in fighting it. That's not any way to live. And so I'm going to link down below every blog post that I've ever written about vision loss or living with blindness or being blind and that kind of thing down below. And I will also link things like I recently posted on my fan page 13 misconceptions or 13 things you probably don't know about blind people. It was an amazing article. I'm going to link that down below as well if you are now sparked your interest to learning more about the world of the blind if you're not blind or don't know anybody. So I'll definitely link all that stuff down below, and again, any videos I've ever done related as well. So there'll probably be tons of links down below. If you stuck with me this whole time, then thumbs this video up. I'm pretty impressed with you. I almost didn't stick with me this whole time. This has been so long and not very well said, but hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out. If I did, I'm sorry. And again, I'm not a medical professional. I'm just relaying what I've learned through my doctors and what I've learned through my life experience. So if what I've said doesn't ring true to your experience with RP, then I'm sorry. There's, we're all different. We all have a completely different experience. Nobody will have my experience or my vision that I had with RP, and I'll never have the vision or the experience that anyone else has had. So that's it for today. I love you guys, and I'll be back next week with, I promise, a shorter video. I love you guys. Thanks for sticking with me. Bye!